Welcome to EVONA Origin Stories, the space podcast where we bring you extraordinary leaders from within the sector as we explore their fascinating stories of early life, career, and how they broke into the space industry. This week on the podcast, we're switching things up a bit. We're bringing you our first ever double guest spot. Today, we are joined by Christina Korp, better known in the industry as the Astronaut Wrangler. Christina is a space advisor, producer, and the director of Space for a Better World. Alongside Christina, we're joined by Nicole Stott, astronaut, aquanaut, engineer, artist, and the director of the Space for Art Foundation. Not only is this our first double guest spot, but we're approaching this episode from a brand new perspective. It's an EVONA Origin Stories Diversity and Inclusion special. Hi, Nicole. I don't think we've formally met. Lovely to meet you. I'm Miya.
You too. You too.
Thank you. So we've had you before on the podcast, haven't we, Nicole? But Christina, it's our pleasure to have you on it for the first time.
Christina, I thought you'd done it before too, for some reason.
No, I think they did. She did a piece about. I think we did like kind of an interview type thing, but I don't.
Oh, okay. Okay, got
your podcast yet.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah. Well, very excited to have you on board, especially as a team. I know you guys are good friends, aren't you? And you're behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we kind of like each other a little bit.
That's all right. Yeah.
Just a bit.
We tolerate each other occasionally.
Yeah. Yeah.
And travels.
The answer to the question is yes.
Good. Glad to hear. This is actually a bit of a special episode. Completely changed the questions, actually. We're doing this from a different kind of perspective. I wanted to get your guys' opinions on kind of some issues around diversity and inclusion. I know you both are really passionate advocates of kind of promoting women in STEM and how we can kind of give women the tools to navigate some issues that are sadly quite persistent in the industry. So looking forward to getting into that with you guys. But maybe just to begin, to maybe just tell our listeners a bit about who you guys both are, how you got into the industry, and some of the very exciting places that your careers have taken you.
You want to start, Nicole?
Yeah,
I can take them down the hill.
No, because we're climbing, baby. We're climbing again, right? Yeah.
This is true.
So, Nicole Stott, really happy to be here. I don't know. I guess all started flying in small airplanes at a local airport, developing a love for flying, wanting to know how things fly, which extended then to, man, if you want to know how airplanes fly, why would you not want to know how rocket ships fly? And heading off to university to study that. And during that time was when the space shuttle program was going on. And I don't know. I just got it in my brain that would be the place to be, to work for NASA. And I wasn't even thinking astronaut at the time. It was just like, wow, this is so cool. And even now, with what I think we'll talk a little bit about today, and being so thankful to be here with my partner in purpose, Christina Korp, is that even at that time, to me, what really appealed about NASA and the work going on in space is that you knew all of it in some way was about improving life on Earth. So long story short, ended up being an engineer with NASA for about 10 years or so, was selected into the 2000 class of NASA astronauts, which, oh my gosh, seems so... seems like it was just yesterday and seems so long ago. And had the opportunity, yeah, it does, fly in space a couple times, a long duration mission on the space station and a short duration flight back to the station on the final flight of the Space Shuttle Discovery. Moved on from that to, I know I'm rambling like a ramble machine. Moved on from that to combining just this love I have for art and space and outreach and trying to communicate all of these amazing things. Ended up founding an organization called Space for Art Foundation, where we're working with kids all over the world, space-themed art therapy. And all of that kind of synergistic stuff really wonderfully led me, into the sphere of the Astronaut Wrangler, who you'll hear from now, Christina Korp. And and the purpose continues. And that's why we are partners in purpose. I think underlying all of the most amazing partnerships in one way or another is purpose. And we are driven by that in a number of different complementary ways that hopefully we'll get to share a little with you about. And that's that little intro to what's the...
No, it's a good intro. That was quite condensed.
Yeah,
amazing.
She knows me.
No. I just mean, even it's very hard to condense quite a career into a short, here's, how I got into space kind of thing. Because even for me, I came from the music world. I was in a family band growing up. I went to LA to become a rock star. And I had some success, in the entertainment industry. But eventually I decided to take a break from that and took this huge, gigantic, lift off into space that I never expected, working for Apollo 11 astronaut Buzz Aldrin. So I was the opposite, where I was not thinking about space at all, to be honest. I was thinking about trying to travel the world, though, and eventually led me to a guy who walked on the moon. And that opened me up into a whole world of being the fly on the wall of the lives of the Apollo astronauts. And then also being the keeper of the memories of the Apollo moon landing, memories of people from all over the world, and how that created this world that we all benefit from today. And so what has happened is, after years of running Buzz's company and running his education foundation, I decided to leave after 12 years, after the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11, and go off on my own journey as a woman in space, and start my own company called Purpose Entertainment. But then also, forging stronger relationships with other astronauts, and in doing that, and working on some of the outreach, that's how Nicole and I started discovering we had this joint love of using art and art inspiration and space inspiration to inspire people about what's going on in space. And then finding ways to try to use both the experience that she's had in space and my experience of working with astronauts to try to inspire people who normally don't get exposed to space to see ways they could come into space. And so now we do lots of outreach projects together, space art projects. We travel the world. We're doing a new online series called The Place I Saw from Space, when we're traveling and trying to showcase ways that space is intertwined in our lives. And we've got a number of things going on and lots of upcoming adventures. But yes, we are shared in this purpose of trying to invite more people from diverse backgrounds, not just women and girls, by the way, but lots of different people to find their place in space.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with you that it's not just women and girls. That's not all we're shouting about here when it comes to diversity and inclusion. It is all of these diverse and new and interesting backgrounds that can bring these new perspectives to the table. And it's so nice to hear, but you both have two very different but incredible stories, and two very different paths and origin stories that have brought you to where you are, the dynamic duo. And it's nice to see that you just said yes to these opportunities. You never knew where it was going to take you, but you're now at a point where you are kind of able to incorporate some of your maybe more personal goals and aspirations and things that you want to change in the world into what you're doing, like using art as a way to inspire people to get thinking about space and what's possible. That's something that I think a lot of people, it would never even cross their minds to merge the two.
It's funny because we'll get that comment, like, just directly, like, well, kids saying things like, well, I didn't think you could do art and science, or, be in the world of art and space. And, I think we're always trying to encourage, even at, a more, I don't know, baseline kind of level, is that, hey, we should be encouraging not just our children, but everyone to be using their whole brain to be the best problem solvers that we can be, especially with the challenges we have to overcome. We not only need to be including, the most diverse population of people from all different kinds of backgrounds and experiences to help solve those problems, but we need to be, like, within ourselves, utilizing the most diverse talents that we have and taking advantage of that within ourselves to solve those problems.
Where I came from, I don't think that most people would think what I was doing as an entertainment person would have fit with what's going on in space. And to be honest, when I started working with Buzz and when I started getting this viewpoint of the space world, I realized, wow, they need more people like me to help translate this to other people, because my tagline for Space for a Better World, the foundation, is I'm trying to connect the space curious to the space serious, because most people in the world are curious about space, but a lot of people feel really intimidated. Like you have to be a genius to work in space. And I'm like, nah, you don't, guys. I know a lot of these people. But I say that jokingly, but my point is, though, that, you know, and this is what we're trying to remind people when we talk about space, and especially the future of space, is every job you need on Earth, we're going to need in space. And if you think about it that way, then you realize there's opportunity for all skill sets, all types of industries, all types of job opportunities. And even for someone like me, who is an entertainment person who took the bare minimum of math and science, but I work with astronauts and deal with NASA and deal with the space agencies, but I have the talent and the skills to help translate some of those complicated things in a way that's relatable for people who are like me, who were never deep into the technical side of space.
And that's, that's really cool, because I think that there has always been this thought of this separation, right? Of, the sciencey, techie kind of people and the artsy kind of people. And we could talk all day about where that has come together just historically throughout the space program and continues to. But I think about it from like the scientific side, like the hardcore scientific side, where art, even if they haven't like blatantly said, we're using art to explain to you or to present to you the wonders, the science of our universe. But they have been. The scientists have been doing that since the very beginning, and they're always trying to find new ways. And I think, of the recent, everybody hopefully is aware of the James Webb telescope and the images that are coming back to us from that scientific machine in space. And what do the scientists do? They false color, or they use cameras with different, sensing ranges to bring out the different colors in the places that they're looking at. And they can identify different temperatures or, chemical composition or the distance between things through the colors that they use. And then you end up with these masterpieces, these stunning works of art that present the universe to us. And that's because our brains, even the scientist's brain, processes that visual, that colorful, that artistic, if you will, presentation of the science so much better than the ones and zeros they could be looking at too, that are coming back from that same instrument. So it's out there everywhere. And it's just really fun to work on sharing it in a way that opens up, like Christina is saying, like opens up people's minds, and I'd like to think hearts too, to, not just the awe and wonder that's around us, but holy moly, all of what's going on in space that's ultimately about improving life on Earth. And who wouldn't want to be a part of that, right?
Completely. I think you've really touched on a very important point there, in that it is about the collaboration of these different skills that is essentially going to feed the innovation that the space industry needs to thrive. And it's also underpinning that it's really important to kind of be challenging these views that people maybe have of the space sector that are somewhat outdated now, that have it in their minds completely limited to kind of hard engineering and science. And it is something that I think, closes a lot of people's minds off to the possibility of what they could be a part of.
What you were just saying, that's what that made me think of is, there's a lot going on. We've seen it evolve within from our NASA colleagues, and even within public affairs and some of the kind of fringe organizations that are working hard to share the spaceflight experience in a more relatable way, in a more creative way. But what I find is interesting is that that's been going on really since the very beginning of space. When we think about Apollo and the way that was presented to the public, that was some of the most creative, like marketing, if you will, that just engaged people in a way that they wanted to, follow. They wanted to be a part of it. They wanted to know the people that were involved. And, there was everything from like Hollywood studio execs in the senior management of NASA, and, leveraging tools like Life magazine to really present these stories in a way that connected with people. And somewhere along the way that kind of dropped off. And now I think they're realizing, man, we need to pick that up again, and we need to use all the tools around us, all the skills around us, to bring those stories to life for people so they can connect with it. And that's absolutely what we're trying to do, and look at it in other creative ways that might not being considered, and just open up this world of space to people that not only are we in it, we are impacted by it every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And that does remind me of, I know you mentioned the James Webb Telescope before. That is something that I think personally really just reminded me of what you just said, in that was huge news. It was everywhere. And you didn't have to necessarily read a really technical article to understand what it was. It was just beautiful images, real life images of space. And that was on people's timelines. You couldn't, not that you would want to escape it, but even people that didn't follow any space organizations or accounts or had no interest in it, they were seeing these images, and it got the whole world talking, I think. And it's about almost making it more accessible, isn't it? And presenting it to people, as you said, in different ways, and getting
Yeah,
them
and like you
interested from that
say,
perspective.
the pillars of creation is that one really, really super colorful image that is just stunning. And I've had so many people who, like you say, are not necessarily space people, but they know what that image is. And the hope is that that lights that spark of curiosity within them, then to go and look and see what's possible. But what we're trying to do, and I think this is where we have a bit more freedom, because we don't work for NASA or for any particular organization, is it's difficult when some of these companies, they have a specific marketing or messaging campaign that they're focused on, but where we, as kind of ambassadors for all of it, can try to message in a way, hopefully, that helps light the spark in someone who doesn't think that maybe there's a role for them in somewhere. Because one day I was in a grocery store and I had a spacey t-shirt on. I probably had a Space for Better World t-shirt, and this young man was like, "Oh, do you work in space? Do you work at NASA?" I said, no, but I work with astronauts. And then he was like, I always loved space, but I'm not very good at math, and so I guess there's nothing there for me. And I was like, "Hey, I'm bad at math too. You could work at space. Like, I'm telling you, go, don't let that stop you." And he's like, "Really?" And I said, "Seriously, go look at the postings. There is a place for you. You could work in administration or marketing, or you could work as a technician. They'll train you. There's so many things that are possible." But that's the point, though, with like what she was saying with the marketing, or the what you get to see is what the Apollo era did so well, was the branding and the marketing and the imagery that inspired people to want to come and be a part of something bigger than themselves. And we're in that moment again with Artemis. We have this opportunity again to get people to be excited about being something greater than ourselves, but have pride in working on something at all levels, of like lawyers. There was a lawyer at one of the events that I was speaking at, and he was like, "Gosh, I love space, but I'm a lawyer." I said, "There are space lawyers." There are space lawyers too, working on the complicated of like, what do you do when we go out to space? Who regulates what we do out there? So even just however we can try to help raise awareness about those opportunities, that's what we're trying really hard to do.
Absolutely. And I think that, hopefully through conversations like this and, getting a piece of content out there and sharing things and starting conversations, we can open some people's eyes into what they could be a part of and what they could achieve, and the kind of future and the career that they could have for themselves. I think a lot of people, it never even crossed their minds. So hopefully we can change that a bit. So kind of speaking, just going back to a bit where we've mentioned some outreach projects and kind of promoting change. I'd really love to hear this from both of you. Kind of from a personal perspective, what has influenced your thinking around, diversity and inclusion, and motivated you to become involved in both being advocates for change in the sector?
I can pipe in first
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Because being surrounded by all male Apollo astronauts for a long time, and going to many meetings with lots of aerospace executives and people at NASA, I never felt uncomfortable in a room as the only woman there, but I began to notice it more. And then I started meeting the female pioneers the first woman to work in mission control, Poppy Northcutt. I met Joanne Morgan, the first woman who was the only woman on all of the footage of the launch for Apollo 11. Joanne Morgan, who was the first woman to work at Kennedy Space Center as an engineer. And that's where I started thinking, wow, maybe I need to start, elevating their stories if I can, because I didn't know about them either. I've learned about all these guys from Apollo, but now I'm learning about these other women who led the way. And interestingly, what Joanne Morgan told me was, she didn't do any interviews at first because she didn't want to rock the boat and she didn't want to stand out. It took her a long time to get accepted by the guys that she worked with. She finally did in 1972. She did an interview. And she said she got thousands of letters from little girls in third grade. It must have been focused on kids saying, oh, I didn't know girls could be engineers. And she said, wow, I realized this was an opportunity for me. Finally, I had made a mistake to not do interviews before, but that made me realize I had a responsibility to try to inspire more girls to not have as hard of a journey as she had. Anyway, so that's kind of what got me start to think about, wow, maybe what I could help do is get more women and girls to see the possibilities, because NASA is actually one of the leaders, and Nicole can weigh in on this, but the leaders of women in space and tech by far than any other industry or any other company organization. They do the best when it comes to women, but it's still not 50-50. There's still work to do. But what I was going to say is, what I learned as I would start talking to more women and girls is unfortunately, a lot of women self-disqualify themselves by not applying for the jobs or looking at a job posting and feeling like they have to fit every single piece of the criteria. And I'm like, no, you don't. I applied for a job to work for an Apollo astronaut, and I knew nothing about space. And I got hired because people say, how did you get this job? And I'm like, I applied, and then I went and did an interview, and then they actually had more skills than they had been looking for, and they decided to hire me. And so that's the other part I want to, like, when women and girls, is to quit disqualifying yourself, quit like taking yourself out of the running by not even applying in the first place. That's something we've got to help change the minds of women and young women who are afraid to. They see a listing and they think, oh gosh, I don't fit all that, I'm afraid to apply. So that's a big part of the problem too. It isn't just on the company side of them not hiring enough women. It's also that, because I will hear the other side of the story where they'll say, we can't find them. And I'm like, well, that's just nonsense. But then I hear the other side though too, where they're like, well, I don't want to apply because I'm worried they're not going to hire me. I'm like, well, they're definitely not going to hire you if you never even apply, So, and Nicole could pipe in,
Yeah, the way you're speaking to that, I think it's, the greatest gift we can give is to be present, right? Is to be out there. And there's a lot of wonderful programs doing that. And, I'm one of these people, I hate to stereotype anything, right? But it seems, and we talk to young girls and women about this, and it seems that for young girls and women, that presence is really important. Kind of the see it, be it thing. There's this, I'm not going to believe it unless I see it. Kind of, there's not just the faith there to go forward with it for the most part. And so very thankful to be part of programs where we are visible, doing stuff like this, where, sharing the presence of it and, the kind of experience that we've had. But yeah, like Christina is saying, that the number one thing that we can do is not second guess or take ourselves out of the running before we even put ourselves in. And one of my very dear friends, who's we started at Kennedy Space Center together in the orbiter processing facility, Jenny Lyons. She is now, senior management, doing incredible things over at the Space Center. And she said something recently that I was like, man, that is just the greatest way to think of this, is that don't be the one that says no to yourself, right? If somebody's going to say, put yourself out there, let them say no, and then figure out what you need to do to come back if that's really what you want to do. But don't be so disrespectful of yourself almost that you that you're already telling yourself no before you've even applied. And I was doing that with the astronaut thing too. That's when people ask how'd you end up doing the astronaut, it wasn't because I was this like go-getter, going to fill it out pursuing it since I saw people land on the moon, because to me that was a job other special people get to do. And until I actually reached out and spoke to people that I considered to be mentors who encouraged me to do what Christina was exactly saying, apply, pick up the pen, apply the one thing you have total control of, I wouldn't be sitting here talking with you today. It's incredible how the opportunities open themselves up when you, first of all, pay attention to what you're curious about, and then you apply yourself in so many ways with respect to it. And it's incredible how things open up unexpectedly, things that you might not have even thought were available to you or possible for you.
Completely. I think this just really touches on the point of how important representation is. And without that, so many groups of people are just going to count themselves out because they think, well, I can't see anyone that I feel represents me in any way in these jobs. So I don't want to go into an industry where I'm going to feel alienated, because you're not going to feel satisfied in your job. And I think counting yourself out is a huge barrier to representation, which is, again, not to stereotype, but technically, and there are statistics which I won't claim to know off by heart that have proved this. Women read job adverts differently to men on some level, and we tell ourselves, oh, if I don't meet 100% of the job criteria, I can't even apply for that role. Whereas men have been said to kind of say, yes, be more self-assured and say, I can do that. I can learn on the job. I can do it. And I think that's why, there is kind of this imbalance in the industry. But I think, as you said, kind of just going for it, starting the conversation, because you never know where it's going to take you. If you can just swallow that part of yourself for a moment and let go of whatever it is that's holding you back. If it's shame, if you're embarrassed, if you feel as if it's imposter syndrome, all of the above. I think if you can get past that for yourself and be a figure for these younger people, maybe who haven't come along yet, who are going to see themselves represented in you, that is going to be a huge kind of bridge towards the future of the sector, I think.
Yeah,
Well,
and you mentioned, sorry, you mentioned the the representation, like being there, this whole idea of being present. We are doing that. I think, all three of us here are working really hard to do that. We know a lot of women who are. Christina mentioned NASA and like human spaceflight. One of the best examples of how, an industry can evolve so like almost mysteriously, not knowing what the secret sauce is, other than space is attractive, it's inspirational. But on the human spaceflight side, it's amazing, what we went from, what Christina was talking about, 50 years ago, which is not that long ago in the grand scheme of things, with respect to, equality issues and diversity, where Joanne Morgan was the only woman in the Launch Control Center for all those flights, to now where both the Mission Control Center in Houston and the Launch Control Center in Florida are run by incredible women. That Artemis 1 launch, the launch director on that flight and for that program is an amazing woman, Charlie Blackwell Thompson. I mean, and when you look out at all the consoles in both of those facilities, and it's just this mix of humanity. It's really, really cool to see. And so it works, it works. Sadly, it's the steps before that, right? It's how do we now encourage more women to be in that pool, to come and be part of this place that's welcoming women, right? And so, I was just over at my university. Still, most university engineering programs struggle to get 20% female representation or, enrollment. I don't know what the right number is. I mean, for us to say that it has to be 50-50 or that until it's 60% women, it's not good enough or whatever. I think it's more important for us to figure out how are these places welcoming, inviting women and people of diverse backgrounds into their programs. But until we can start increasing the pool, how do we maintain and build it in the industry too? And then stepping back even further from that, it's great for us to be out there. We need to keep doing this. But I always try to tell, when I go over to the university and I'm talking with young women in, like, even not in their curriculum stuff, but they're out doing building Baja vehicles to go race and, compete, and other clubs and things. And I'm like, you guys need to be out there too. You guys need, right now, you're in university experiencing this and knowing that this is possible and that you're welcomed into it and you're doing really cool stuff outside of what you're studying. Go talk to the kids at high schools or at elementary schools and show them what you're doing. And you're just so close. That's like that next step for them, so that they can see that that's possible as well.
The thing I was going to add is, so I spoke at the master's graduation program for the International Space University last June, and I was very happy and excited to see that more than half of that graduating class were women. But then in the reception afterwards, they all came up to me and told me how worried they were going to get to be able to get a job, that they wouldn't be able to get a job. And I was like, what? Wait a minute, you guys, what are you talking about? You just got a master's degree. Like, they want you. And that's where I thought, again, like you were saying, yes, the representation is great. And I hope that by seeing us and hearing us talk, that it inspires people. It's a bit of a shame that that's what it needs to happen, is that they have to see us to believe that there's possibility there, And I will say, the thing that is a little frustrating too is, I feel, and I say this, and sometimes I get gasps when I'm on a panel, but I say the STEM movement was a mistake. It was a mistake because they thought, okay, we need all these really technically competent people, so let's focus on STEM. And guess what? It's not working. It is not getting more people to come into, and more women and girls. It is actually, we're lower than we were in the 70s. And I think it's because, like, my daughter is 11 years old. She's really good at math. And by the way, I actually was good at math in school, but I hated math. So I purposefully did bad at math to get out of advanced math, because I hated math. And so my daughter is the same way. She's really good at math, but she's very artistic. She likes to draw and do video editing and do very creative things. But that doesn't mean that this natural technical inclination that she has isn't a valuable asset as part of her whole skill set. And that's where even I don't like math. I don't want to do math, but it does actually give me an advantage in everything that I do to help understand when engineers are explaining things or scientists are explaining things. I have this natural inclination to be able to help translate that in a way that people who are not technical can understand. So I say this because I think the STEM movement has just sent this message to young people throughout society, that if you're good at math and science, then you're valuable to the overall picture of what we need, when the reality is we need people with all kinds of valuable skills that come together. The creative thinking that we have is a crucial part of helping solve problems that are technical or scientific. And like Nicole was saying, even if these scientists who are doing the James Webb Space Telescope don't think of themselves as doing something artistic, what they're doing when they're using all of these tools to make infrared or to highlight, the different gases or whatever, the fact is it's turning into a beautiful piece of art that is the art of nature. And so that's why saying the STEM movement is a mistake, is I just think it sends the wrong message to people who are multifaceted. And as Nicole says, you're encouraging or trying to tell everybody, use one side of your brain. That brain is the important part that helps the world. And the fact is, it's the whole brain that we need from everybody. So that's where it's not popular, but I think that we have to start thinking of a different way to inspire people and not have it be, if you're in STEM, then you can be a part of all of this,
Yeah, absolutely. I think so kind of on the topic of equality and inclusion and the importance of these new skills, I know we have touched on this in what we've been saying, but it'd be great to hear both your opinions on, in a bit more detail, and in your experience, how these diverse ways of thinking and these kind of broad skill sets, how do they lead to innovation and progression?
I think about astronaut selection, right? And I have this picture I show in most of my presentations of my astronaut class. Way back in 2000, we all just met each other. we're sitting, we're getting our group class picture done and we're getting a little goofy. Our class name is the Bugs. So we have these antenna on and we're kind of, just playing around. And we didn't really know each other then. We met 2 weeks into it. And now I look at the picture and I see the personality of every single one of those people that I know really well. And I use that picture though, because most people want to know, what's the checklist? Like, if I do these 3 things, they'll pick me to be an astronaut, right? And there are probably 3 things that NASA requires as basic requirements. But outside of that, what I love and what I try to tell people is it's wide open outside of that. And the only reason we have just those 3 things is because we got to try to restrict the number of applications we get, that we're honing down from tens of thousands down to 8 or 10 people, right? Until we are flying more in space and have more opportunities to get more people there, we have to figure out a way to narrow it down. But even with those criteria, it's pretty wide open. And so in that picture, I tell people, from a career side, there's oceanographers, geophysicists, biologists, engineers, fighter pilots, test pilots. You look at the pictures, there's a little bit of diversity of color and, boys and girls and, stuff like that. But then on top of that, experientially, there's the race car driver and the mountain climber and the chef and the artist and the near professional water skier and all of these things that people that make them who they are, right? And so diversity is coming through that as well, right? Not just what you studied or what you look like, but the experience that you have and what rounds you out as a human being. And the selection process then becomes more about sitting across from a table from somebody and wanting to know, would I be okay being locked up for 6 months in a relatively confined space with this person? And that's a mix of personality and their professionalism. And are they going to set the torque wrench back to 0 after they use it? And I mean, like simple, like stuff like that. Like, are they going to have respect for this place that they're living in and for the people they're sharing it with? And by looking at it that way, because their resume already qualified them. If they got to the table to interview, they've already qualified that way. But it's who they are as this human being. And I think that's, more and more, that's what brings the success to a really complex mission, is that it's not just this cookie cutter, and I would argue even within the Apollo guys, there was quite a diverse mix of human beings in those, the Mercury 7, even, the first people selected, they were all of a fighter pilot, test pilot kind of thing, but they were a diverse group of people just on their own. But the more and more of that we get in, the more where we look at this balance between the strengths one person has versus the weaknesses they have as well, and balance that out. And that house builder and that water skier are going to have talents that apply to everything we do in a space mission. And they're going to bring it at different points. And that to me is the big thing. It's like, how do we pull out of people all of their talents, their own diverse mix of things going on, regardless of what flavor human they are, right? How do we bring all of those flavors together and then get the best of all of them? And that's how that's how our missions are successful. And it's really cool to see that working. And I know that was a rambled way of responding, and it probably didn't completely fill out the answer that you're looking for, but I always tend to think like on the very basic level of stuff, right? And I don't know, it's like the second guessing. By doing that to ourselves, we're not acknowledging the strengths that we do have, and we're not acknowledging the real weaknesses we have either, that do need to be balanced by other people in the process. But we need to be our own. Yeah, we need to be our own. We need to be willing to showcase the strengths we have in, all these different ways, so that we can bring the best to a diverse work.
I think that perfectly answers the question.
But actually, I'm glad you brought that up too, because we do focus on art and kind of like this visual stuff, but the other skills, like, being somebody who's good with their hands or that kind of a thing too, is also really valuable. Because Bob Benkin and Doug Hurley, who they were from the same astronaut class as you.
Yes.
Yep. They just got a Presidential Medal of Bravery or something at the White House a couple of days ago. But what I like about them is Doug Hurley is a Marine, total military guy, and Bob Mencken was is a physician, right? He just retired.
He's a flight engineer.
Flight engineer, sorry.
Flight test engineer, yeah.
But what they were talking about, or what Doug was saying to me at one point, was when they did spacewalks, that Bob has like this ability to do things with his hands during a spacewalk. He's just much more adept at being able to, and it was purely about, man, his hand strength and how he can navigate and the way he can manipulate things is so much better than me. And that's something that probably people don't think about, like being good with your hands, of having kind of dexterity with your hands, and how that is something that gives him a strength over being better at spacewalking than, a guy who's a fighter pilot or whatever.
Well, and you mentioned that the guy that I did my spacewalk with, Danny Olivas, and he might kill me for saying this, I don't know. I hope he wouldn't, because I think it's amazing. He and his wife, the way they met was through ballet. And, when you are learning to do a spacewalk, it feels like it has to be this very like physical manhandling kind of thing, because you're training in a pool in a 300-pound suit doing, your feet are always going back to the floor when you might need to be upside down, and you're having to struggle. The most physically challenging thing I've ever done. And the best spacewalkers will tell you that it doesn't end up being about that physical strength. It ends up being about how do you apply the strength you have in a really graceful way to choreograph the moves and what you're having to do out there. Now, I don't know that Bob would, say that being a ballerina would be the way to go. But again, it's another diverse way of looking at it. And, the perspective that somebody with their talents brings into it. And Danny is also known as one of these, like, just like naturally talented spacewalker people. And, and it was because of the way he thought of it, was the grace in what you have to bring to that, the thoughtfulness that way. And so I just think it's really cool to see how really complex things are solved by applying very different perspectives and talents to them, and just uplifting the possible success for it by doing that.
I think the two analogies there about you looking at your astronaut class and, now looking back and seeing everyone's personalities, and the spacewalk analogy, I think it really highlights something that we've actually been talking about recently at EVONA, is that there are multiple elements to diversity. And a lot of people, when they're just starting to kind of tackle these issues, they lead with visible diversity. And that is a bit of a hollow-minded, a bit of a hollow approach to it, really. It's tokenism, isn't it? If you're strategically hiring people to seem visibly diverse, you've not finished the job there. You've not achieved the end goal there. And it's about, there's the importance of invisible diversity, which is, as we said, these skills, these backgrounds and experiences that make a person uniquely valuable to a team.
I mean, I will say, even for me, even though I would say that music or the visual or the marketing or the branding that people see, what I'm also good at is I can set up a PA system. I can set up an audio visual, and I understand the background technical part of that too, which helps make me better at what I do when you're seeing what you present, because I know the technical details too of what I need to, how I need to format a video to fit on a
Comes
screen.
from lugging and hooking up all the band equipment, right?
Yeah. All the years of carrying gear and having to get up on a ladder and put lights up on a ceiling, and being the only one who wasn't afraid of heights, to get up, and, again, all those kind of skills too, that a lot of times people kind of forget about, it isn't just, everyone is multi-layered, multifaceted. It's almost no one is just an expert at this one tiny thing, that's so rare. And that's a thing that it's always good to remember too when you're applying to things. Now, the thing I want to touch on, because I know we don't have a ton of time left, but the other dilemma now with trying to get a job though is, and Nicole and I have talked about this part too, is there was a period during the pandemic where I was looking for a job because, my plans as an entrepreneur kind of got blown up with the rest of the world. And so I started applying for jobs, but I had to navigate the algorithm of the
Oh, yeah.
keywords that had to be in my resume. And man, I was not making it past because I have such a unique history too. And working with astronauts, nobody else is looking for an astronaut wrangler, I don't think. And so I was not getting very far with my job search in that way too. So I'm not afraid to apply, man. I'll apply to everything. But I wasn't getting through the algorithms because I don't know, that's a learning curve now too, of making sure you have the right keywords. And I get it. Big companies have to try to sift through and there's specific things they're looking for, but I also think they're missing a lot of really great candidates because they've narrowed it to these search words that maybe people don't know to put in their resume. And that's something I think even EVONA is trying to help both job seekers and job finders or workforce finders to try to help navigate that issue. Actually,
Yeah,
Nicole,
that's a big deal.
you said that you with your resume as an astronaut wouldn't know if you would know how to fill out an application to get a job, right?
No, not at all. This transition from filling it out on paper and somebody physically looking at it, going through it, finding what they need in it. Um, I think we really risk losing wonderful candidates for jobs because of this, this algorithm where it's kind of a two-sided thing. If you tell everybody what the keywords are, then how do you sift through it? But if you don't know how to present yourself with the appropriate lingo that's going to get picked up, all this other stuff you write about your experience is not even going to be seen. And it's the other way too, right? It's I look at going back to how we get the pool of people is, universities, for example, and how they work with employers. I know I could go back to my university and there's probably a list of 10 employers that every student at that university would want, to work with. So the university at a minimum should know exactly what the criteria are, in those places for these students to be able to apply and understand whether they're qualified or not. And then the employer should understand from these universities that what's in these degree programs applies to them and how that works. And I use the example of NASA because there are limitations there, right? NASA is still, even as wonderful as the human spaceflight side of diversity has grown out, there's still this limitation of NASA thinking that for the most part, everyone needs to be an engineer to work on the hardcore space stuff. And the universities aren't always putting out engineers, but what they're putting out totally satisfies the requirement that the job has. So this syncing up, I think we're at this stage again where there's the industry and the universities, academia need to sync up with, how to place people and how to position, their degree programs so that they are satisfying the requirements of the employers, and the employers need to better understand what the students coming at them are giving them through the diverse kinds of degrees that they can be getting. And and then that keyword thing that drives me completely insane. It really does. I think it's such an unnecessary limiter, and it takes the people out of the loop in a way that I don't know, when you hire somebody in the end, there's a very personal kind of intimate exchange relationship that goes on to bring somebody into your company, right? Even if it's a big company, you're going to be working with other people. And so to not have that, to not know that there's that human interface with the, with the evaluation of your application is, I mean, I think I would be frustrated by that to think there's this machine sifting through and finding words. And then if I happen to put the right word, then they'll talk to me,
Then you'll get a real person. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems ridiculous, really. That sounds so counterproductive, especially to look at the kind of jobs it's affecting. It just is mind-blowing, isn't it, really?
But it is what they're doing, and I get it, because they're thinking, okay, we're trying to streamline the process of how many applications come in, but the dilemma is a lot of probably amazing people are falling through the cracks in the process.
Absolutely. I think we've touched on some really important topics here, and I think a great way to kind of round off this conversation is to give some tangible advice to anyone listening that we've struck a chord with, really. So I think my final question for you guys is, do you have any advice for people from underrepresented groups, whether that be whatever that may be, and maybe you, both of you, if there's something that you wish you'd kind of known as younger women kind of coming into this industry, what kind of advice would you give to them when they're kind of looking to begin their careers in STEM fields?
Wow. Well, I guess I'd, with respect to the STEM field kind of thing, I guess I would, go back to some of the things we've already touched on pretty regularly throughout this conversation is even if it's a STEM job and that's where you're excited and interested about, don't limit the way you present yourself and the talents you have and the experience you have to just what would be thought of as STEM kinds of things. Really present the whole you, when you're applying to something or thinking about pursuing something. Again, the whole brain kind of thing. And the other thing would be, it goes to what, Christina kicked us off with, which is do not be the one that's telling yourself no. Do not somehow figure out through a mentor or a friend or family member, a professor, whatever it is, find those people that really do tend to see more in us than we see in ourselves, and allow them to lift you up, allow them to put that, you can tell yourself yes mindset into you, and then take action on that, because that's the biggest disservice we can do to ourselves, is keep telling ourselves no.
Yeah, and to turn it the other side would be, I would just say, apply to every job. And by the way, I hate the algorithm thing too, but there are some sites online that help you evaluate your resume, that can help you say, okay, here's what kind of job are you looking for? And then they do try to help you put the keywords in to help you. I went through this process, and it is kind of painful and laborious, but after that, I did start getting through the algorithms. By then my company started picking up a bit and I started making progress. So I didn't pursue that any longer, but I at least in the process learned, okay, so there are some tools there online that you can find that can help you, but try to apply for every job. And like you say, don't take out the things that you think they may not like. They might actually be happy that you know how to do origami or,
Yeah.
or something like that. They might actually think, ooh, that would be valuable for what we're trying to do right now. So that sort of thing. And then, also don't let people talk you out of it either, because that's the other thing. Getting people to help encourage you. Sometimes people will try to discourage you. And if it's something you really want to do or you want to explore it, go for it. You can always change your mind later. That's what people forget about sometimes, is that you do not have to be set on that path for life. You can change direction. That's what I did with my career. I went from music to working completely in space, and it was not the plan for my life. So you don't have to have it all figured out either. That's the other thing.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both so much for joining me. Been our first double podcast. It's been great. You two got some incredible insights for people listening, and the experience you've had. It's been so great to get an insight into that. So really appreciate you joining me today.
Thanks for
Thank you
including
for
us.
having us.
You're very welcome. Well, enjoy the rest of your morning. Hope to speak soon.
All right.
Yeah,
Thanks.
me
Thanks for
too,
including
guys.
me. See you guys.
Thanks so much. Lovely to meet you, Nicole.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye,
Bye.
Christina.
Bye.